Today on this cold edition of This Old Bike, we're going to check the valve clearance and adjust as necessary on the YAMAHA XT225 Cero motorcycle. Now if you look at the manual says have your dealer do this job, but this is a very simple job, and if you have a limited amount of mechanical ability, you can do this job yourself. The only specialty tools we're really going to need for this job is a feeler gauge and a good set of needle nose pliers. You can also get a valve adjusting tool from Cycle Pro or any of the other vendors to help with this job, and we'll show you how that works once we get into it. Pick up a copy of the Yamaha service manual. It's available online in a PDF format, and save it into iBooks. On page 6-3 it talks about the valve clearance maintenance interval. Check and adjust the valve clearance when the engine is cold. Initially 600 miles when the bike's brand new, and looks like 4,000 miles, 7,000 miles, 10,000 miles. It's also got a time interval, 1 month, 6 months, or 12 months. I'm at 2,500 miles and 12 years old, and I'm not sure if the valves have ever been checked. So to adjust the valves on the Yamaha, you're going to need to remove both side panels, the seat, and the fuel tank to get to these valve covers right here. And of course, this is a very simple single cylinder 2-valve engine. One intake valve here, one exhaust valve located right there. But since this series is designed for the beginning rider, let's review some basic 4-cycle engine theory inside where it's a little warmer. Why is it called 4-stroke? It requires 4 piston movements to complete the engine cycle, as opposed to a 2-stroke or a 2-cycle engine, which only requires 2 cycles. And here's the 4 strokes that are made using this animation. First is the intake cycle. Count the revolutions too of the crankshaft as this goes around. So here's the intake stroke, sucking in the fuel air mixture. Here comes the piston up to compression, number 2, power stroke coming down, beginning the second rotation of the crankshaft, and now pushing out the exhaust gases, the exhaust stroke. 4 strokes, 4 cycles, but remember it only takes 2 revolutions of the crankshaft, or always takes 2 revolutions of the crankshaft to complete all 4 cycles. And this is true of any engine. I don't care if you're running a, what is this, a 28-cylinder radial engine like the 4360 here. It's still going to take 2 complete crankshaft revolutions to fire all of those cylinders. Start by pulling the side covers. Left side cover. And on the inside of the left side cover is the valve lash in millimeters. Intake 0.07 millimeters, exhaust 0.17 millimeters. Remove the seat. 10 millimeter socket works. A little muddy down there. Clean your work area where you're going to work around the valves before you dive in here. I like to put the hardware back where I found it for reference on reassembly. Turn the fuel off. Pull the fuel line. If this fuel line gives you trouble, now's a good time to renew it. Remove the vent line. 10 millimeter socket on the fuel tank bolt. Note the order of these parts holding the fuel tank together. And pull the fuel tank. I'll show you the stock tank here in a second. Now when you set this tank down, be careful that you don't set it down on the petcock and damage it. Set it down like that. Now we can get access to the valve covers. On the stock fuel tank, you'll have to remove these air scoops, as they're called. They come apart right down here and slide off the tank right off of these tabs here. Remember also, if you have the California tank, to remember to disconnect your charcoal canister line located right there. Otherwise the tank comes off in the same fashion. Let's finish cleaning up in our work area here before we open this up. Let's remove the spark plug to help us relieve the pressure and find top dead center. And we're going to remove these two covers, this one to help us find our top dead center indicator, and this one to get a hold of the crankshaft and turn the engine over. Inside of this housing should be the stator, and there is the bolt that you can get a hold of to rotate the crankshaft. Inside of here should be our top dead center indicator once we get near top dead center. These covers have O-rings. Check their condition. So get a hold of the crankshaft with that 17mm socket and rotate it until you get the 3 marks in there lined up. Can you see them in there? The middle mark is top dead center, and it lines up with the mark on the outside ring. Now remember what I said about a 4-stroke engine takes 2 rotations of the crankshaft to go through all 4 cycles? Well, those marks show up every rotation, so you could have top dead center or bottom dead center. So the best way to do that is rotate the crankshaft here, put your finger over the spark plug here, the spark plug hole, and you will feel the compression of the actual top dead center. Then locate your marks and line them up. I got a hold of the crankshaft. I'm spinning it clockwise with the socket wrench, or with the breaker bar. Finger on the spark plug. There it is. Compression right there. You can feel it. Now let's back this thing up till we get our marks lined up. And there they are. Just about like that. The bolts are all the same length. 2 bolts on the intake side, 3 on the exhaust side. Crack the valve covers loose with a 5mm Allen. You may need to use an Allen wrench with a bit of a cheater like that. And the cover should come right off. And there is your tiny little exhaust valve. The rocker arm and the adjustment nut. And here is an O-ring. Check that. And there is the intake valve, rocker arm, and adjustment. With the engine on top dead center, the valve should be tight in the cylinder head and the lash should be loose, so any play should be slightly vertical like that, and no play side to side, which would indicate a worn out rocker bushing up in the engine. So that looks good, and that feels good. Now let's check with the feeler gauge. Here's the 0.5mm gauge. Slides right up underneath there, and I can feel it dragging on the intake. So that's going to be good. A little bit on the tight side. Here's the 0.8, and it won't quite let it through. So 0.5 to 0.9 on the intake. 15 to 19mm on the exhaust here. Here's 15. 15 is nice and loose. 20mm. Ooh. So that one's a little bit loose. Let's try and maybe tighten that one up. Should be 15 to 19. So we'll break the jam nut loose with a 10mm wrench and then adjust the valve with the pliers. Now this would be where you would typically use a valve adjustment tool, a tool that just fits that square head right there and helps you adjust it a little easier. In this case, we want to tighten it up, so we're going to bust the jam nut loose and rotate clockwise the valve adjustment screw. Okay, the jam nut's loose. Now see how easy that is to turn? Bring that right over to about there. Now remember, when we tighten up this jam nut, it's going to tend to tighten up your adjustment screw as well. So that's where the valve adjusting tool will help prevent that for a more accurate job. So we got the jam nut tightened back down and the adjustment looks good. So again, to reiterate, if the valve clearance is too loose, tighten it up. If the valve clearance is too tight, loosen it up. Reset the jam nut, put her back together. Clean up all your mating surfaces and bolt her back together. And torque everything back up to spec. Reverse the disassembly procedures of putting the tank back on, the seat back on, and the side panels. Fire it up and ride it for another 3,000 miles or a year, or like most of us, we just ride it until it starts running crummy again and then before we check the valves. Remember, as the valves wear, they will continue to seat deeper and deeper into their seats, thus tightening up the valve clearance. And if you don't keep them adjusted, you'll start losing compression. Valve adjustment on the XT225 Cero. Easy peasy.